Hi everyone, welcome to the second episode of Sunday Vibes at NST podcast. My name is Intan and I am the editor of the print version of Sunday Vibes at NST. As always, I'm joined by the usual suspects, my lovely co-hosts Tammy Chan, Elena and last but definitely not least, Ashreena Pillay. And today, in conjunction with Father's Day, our topic is all about fathers. Maybe to kick off the show, let me ask Tammy to perhaps introduce her dad.
Hey everyone, man, it's great to be back. So my dad, he's actually a financial consultant. I'm not sure if I want to reveal his name.
All right.
I call him Papa Chan. Yeah, so my dad is a financial consultant. So right now he is kind of retired. So he's doing financial consultancy because of his passion. He really loves to help people manage money. And, you know, growing up, he has always been a very good, advisor. He always taught us the importance of saving. So now he is sharing his passion with his clients, you know, in terms of investments and stuff like that. So
including you, I'm guessing.
Yeah, including myself.
Right. What about you, Elena?
Okay, so to be honest, I had never any clue what my dad did. For the longest time, you know, it was always, you know, when everybody asked me, what does your father do? I'm like, I know he's in construction. I know he does surveying.
So he was quite very vague about what he did?
Yeah, because
I think he does a lot of jobs. I think that's how parents or fathers previously are. They just survive, you know.
Yeah, it's the olden days where, you know, you had no clue. We knew he went to work.
Yeah.
We knew he came back at a certain time, and we knew to disappear and make ourselves scarce when he comes back. So that was about all I knew about my dad then.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Okay, what about you, Ashreena? Did you have any idea about what your dad did for a living?
He was a government servant.
There you go. So Ashreena knows what dad did.
But if you ask me specific day-to-day tasks and what he did, it's a little bit vague, but I knew that I followed him to office, so I've seen him work.
Right.
But he's a government servant.
Right. Well, I have no issues about my dad.
Yeah.
I knew for a fact that he was, when we were still in Malaysia, he was with Port Authority in Klang. So I think he was operations manager. And then after that, I think he was with Pernas MISC in the shipping line. And then he left Malaysia to pursue his law degree in London. And then thereafter, I think he dabbled in, he joined up with his friend and they were in the shipping business. But I would classify my dad as an entrepreneur because he was always dabbling in numerous businesses which I knew not what they were, but I think they were pretty legal. Because, we didn't have any policemen, coming to knock on our door or anything. Do you guys think that do you guys consider yourselves as daddy's girl by any chance? Or were you closer to your mother?
I would definitely say that I wasn't daddy's girl.
Oh, you were not?
Not at all. I think growing up, we were all more attached. I mean, as girls, I suppose we were more attached to our mums. Dad was this mysterious figure that, showed up every time we needed discipline. It's like, wait till your father comes home kind of thing. So we didn't really establish that very close, camaraderie. Nothing like today's, I'm your best friend, I'm your daddy's little princess. No such thing. At the time when I was growing up, daddy was very prominent figure at that time with the rotan.
When you were growing up. But I'm sure the relationship evolved, right? As you got older?
As we got older, because he was like a typical Indian father, very controlling. We never had the freedom growing up. But towards the end, and I think it's only in the twilight of his years that we actually had a semblance of a relationship. There's a lot of things I wish I knew about him.
Your dad passed away, presumably?
Yeah, he passed away in 2018. On hindsight, we did have a good relationship towards the end, and I'm very, very grateful for that. But growing up, not at all. He was a typical Asian father. My way or the highway. This is my house. As long as you're under my roof, you obey my rules.
Right.
I don't know how many people can identify with that.
Do you identify with that, Ash?
I have to say, first, let's establish it. I am a daddy's girl. Because, if I'm going to lie about it, no way. No one's going to believe this. Anybody who knows me is listening, So, definitely a daddy's girl, but I understand where Elena is coming from, because my dad was also the very silent, only speaks when he needs to. Childhood, I think maybe age with 13 and under. Yes, I spent time with him. He took us to the library and stuff like that. We did a lot of activities together, but speaking and having conversations was more with my mom. So yes, I spoke to my dad, for sure, but it wasn't a deeper connection. I felt like I got to know him a lot better, ages 13 and onwards. And then I really understood. And he's a guy that if you ask him a question, he'll answer, but he doesn't voluntarily tell you things.
Right.
My mom is the opposite. So it's easier that way, to just, yeah.
What about you, Tammy? Are you a daddy's girl? I'm sure you are, because you look like the type of daddy's girl.
So I guess first of all, we have to define daddy's girl, right?
Yeah.
I guess for me, it's like I'm close with both my parents, but for different reasons. I always go to my dad when I have problems. I mean, growing up, like Elena, my dad is kind of like this really strict figure where you are kind of scared. So as I grow up, Ashreena, I speak to him more when we have, issues and stuff. He's always the person who give me a lot of advice. So in that sense, I'm very close to my dad. Yeah, even when I talk to him on the phone, like I have a friend who commented this. She said, you speak to your dad like you're speaking with your best friend.
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah, I never knew, because for me, growing up, I always feel like me and my dad, because he is like an Asian dad, there is still like that sort of barrier. Yeah, but I think in terms of, consulting him or really confiding in him, yeah, he was always there for me. And in that sense, I feel that I am quite a daddy's girl.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. What about you, Intan?
Tell us, Intan.
I think you are too.
Oh, you're right. Yeah, I think I would say I'm a daddy's girl. But again, similar to your stories, growing up, he was public enemy number one for sure. Because he would be the one that dished out the punishment. My mom would nag. My mom would bring him in, and he'd be the one, that caned us or whipped us or whatever. And he was always that formidable figure, the dark figure that would, come tromping in from work, and we'd all scatter. But I would say over the years, as I reached into my adulthood, I think as a teenager also, he was still, public enemy number one, because he was totally not into me having boyfriends to begin with.
Yeah.
So that was bad.
I think that's what we all can agree on.
Yeah, so that made him public enemy number one, and but I think as I into my adulthood, because I didn't spend much time at home, we established a more mature relationship. So between my mother and I think my dad and I tend to gang up a lot more with each other. So because my dad and I are so similar, and so what tends to happen is my mom would be on the other side. So my dad and I would gang up, and we because we are so similar. When I think about it, a lot of his traits and characteristics I've actually inherited or adopted without realizing it. He's very brave, and he's a daredevil, and he's quite fearless. All those streaks of, I wouldn't say disobedience or turbulence, but I think that, that fearlessness.
Yeah.
I think that's probably something I've inherited, and whether it's for the better or for worse, I mean, who knows, right? But it was something my mother wasn't quite keen on.
It's funny because when we were growing up, we were so, we didn't get along with our dad, but we realized that it's because we are like him.
For me, it's kind of different though, because I'm so different from my dad. My personality, I'm kind of laid back, no direction, which is kind of floaty. My dad, he is a very practical and realistic person. He actually add balance to my life. So I'm very grateful for that. I always say like it's a blessing that he's in my life because he is so different. But I respect him. I will take whatever advice they have and balance it with my own idealism. We are dreamers,
Yeah.
and sometimes dreamers, we tend to dream and float without a direction. So my dad, he planted me back on ground.
What about you, Ash? I mean, do you and your father complement each other in any ways?
My mom always says I always side with him. She hates it.
Do
But
you?
I do. But only because I see his point. Same like Tammy, although I feel like character-wise, I'm very much like my mom, chitty-chatty, out there and all that. But yeah, I'm also kind of very similar to my dad. We think things through.
Right.
My mom's a little bit more of, not to say trigger happy, but if she wants to do something, she goes and just does it, But for me, I think, 10,000 times, what's going to happen? What's the thing?
You do?
I do. I mull too much. I'm a Taurus.
Ah.
I'm stubborn. You want to get me over the line, it's going to be a bit of a, task. But anyways, some similarities in the sense where my dad was a volcano. He could go, 0 to 100 within a snap, right? If he didn't, if something didn't sit right, especially with us. If we were really like, mischievous and being rascals, then he would just go, that's it. My mom just had to say, you know what they did? And that's it. It's enough. He would go, really just, but he was actually a very calm person. So it's just a very different exterior where there's certain things that he would not stand for, which is, kids not behaving properly.
Right.
But,
what's the most annoying thing about your dads?
I only have one.
Oh,
Because
great.
my dad is very meticulous. Right?
So that annoys you?
Hell yes. I mean, let me tell you this story, right? I was in college, and that time, me and my dad, we stay in Kuala Lumpur while my family is in Ipoh. So one morning on a Saturday, he woke me up at 9. I'm not a morning person. He asked me to mop the floor
At 9 o'clock.
in the morning.
Right.
So I already very grumpily started to mop the floor. He asked me, what's your plan? What's my plan? I plan to mop the floor. He said, from where to where?
wow.
Yeah, so for me, I'm not sure about you guys. If you say mop the floor, you mop the floor. You don't care. You just mop the whole house.
Whichever direction.
Exactly. I just feel where I want to start, I start. But as long as I mop
it.
the whole thing. So this is a lesson for people who doesn't know how to mop floors. You should mop furthest from the source of your water. As you go, you mop towards the source. So that you don't
know that.
dirty where. Yeah. Okay, I learned something.
So that was what you learned from your dad?
Yeah, but this is my dad. He is that meticulous. So
Wow.
everything he does, you have to explain. It's great, but it's kind of frustrating if you are a person like me. That's all I'm saying. Because
Right.
you don't think things through sometimes. You just do because you want to do it, But then he would want to know the plan. He would make sure that everything has a reason. Everything is properly set up before you embark onto that big journey. For us, it's like, oh, I want to do this. I get into it.
Right.
For him, it's like, okay, what are the steps? Yeah, so that's my dad. Sometimes I really appreciate this trait, like most of the time actually. But sometimes it's really annoying.
Then what about you, Ash?
He's always late.
No.
I'm not kidding. He's always late. So I think somehow or other it has rubbed off on me and my brother. I don't know why. Even if we have to go, I remember you want to go do your passports, and my mom's like, we got to get up at 6. So we got to be, at the immigration by 7. Make it fast, right? He would somehow, be late. And then we would end up going late to certain events or places.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's the most annoying thing about your
Yeah,
dad. What
that's the
about you,
thing.
Al?
I have a list, but
No. We
but
don't
to
need a list.
narrow it down, there's just two things. One, he's a typical Asian dad. When I was growing up, no boys could enter my house. Okay, everybody knew that you can only walk me home up to a certain point, after which the journey is alone. It's just me. And then as I got older, it was just the opposite. He wanted, he needed to do this matchmaking thing. And his idea of matchmaking is legendary among my friends. Because he used to be this one-man dating agency.
Oh, wow.
He will send my number and pass it around to eligible men, and I'll have strangers calling my phone. Then I said, where do you get my number from? Oh, your dad passed it to me. And I'm like, seriously? And he used to do this so often. It was a standing joke, in my house. As an Indian parent,
Yeah.
he
Yeah.
felt that he was not doing his duty because this particular daughter of his just refused to get along with the program. I think right till the end, my dad was like that. Oh, so I really miss his matchmaking. Today, I just laugh about
That
it.
sounds like a mom's job in my books, but I'm not sure.
But they seem to have this reservoir of eligible men.
They just want
I
you to
don't know-
get married.
I don't know where they get them from.
Why is it I never got this from my parents? My
I
dad would like to keep the men away from me for as long as possible.
Yeah.
And it's like, my daughter's my daughter, and
Yeah.
forget it. Just stay away. She needs her education.
Yes.
She needs to live. And then you can come. And even then, there's no guarantee that I'm going to be okay with you, going
Yeah.
after my daughter.
What
Yes,
about you?
what about you?
Intan?
One, I share it with Ashreena, actually, lateness. I'm a stickler for time, and I hate waiting. My dad happens to think that time waits for him. So whenever we have an appointment, I try to pretend it's actually half an hour earlier than it is, because from having grown up seeing this trait of his, I realized that he thinks everybody should wait for him. So that irritates the hell out of me. The other thing is, when we were growing up, the fact that he did not think any male figure should come within the periphery of my existence. All right. So unlike you guys, You know, I don't think he was a typical Malay father either, because I think what he wanted for us was to have our education, go as far as we could, and then only think about, the opposite sex. And I think he was, when it came to men, when it came to boys, he completely no-go, no-go. We had to hide things from him because of that.
My dad, who's late, right? His favorite phrase growing up, I always remember he used to repeat this: "Time and tide waits for no man."
How ironic.
Tell me about it. So now, just when you mentioned this, I was thinking, oh my God, I remember this saying. And he used to say it to me, like, do things, when you're meant to do it or whatever, right? Don't wait, don't this.
Maybe it was lost in translation to him.
I think so. I'm going to ask him about this.
I find your father protecting you very endearing.
Yeah, it is.
No, it's quite unusual, right?
Yeah.
Because he's Asian, like everybody else's dad is. But he just wanted us to just go as far as we could. I had to hide a photo of myself and my boyfriend. I was at university. I remember my mom and dad actually did, it was a surprise trip to my flat where I was staying with my single friends. And I didn't know they were coming. So I had to frantically gather every single pictures I had, which lined my bed, right? And stuff under the bed. And I was trying to visualize where he might not look for them.
Right.
But I forgot, as Dad likes to say, I tasted salt well before you. Right? So he knew exactly where to look. So I was in the kitchen preparing food for them. And suddenly I had Dad, legs akimbo. So what's this? And I was like, no.
Oh, God.
That silent scream, welling inside. And I was like, oh, this is just a friend. And he'll be like, what's the hand doing there? Right? It was with a bunch of friends. And in that, how many minutes I was in the kitchen, he had actually scrutinized the photo and deduced that this is no ordinary friend. And I had hell after that.
I think no one is good enough for our dads. No man.
About it. No, it's true.
Yeah, but I like that about my dad because the thing is, he views you as an individual with potential.
Yes.
And this is something that's not only applied to me, but also to my brother, because I have, a brother and of course a sister as well. Yeah, growing up, it was about how we could develop ourselves as individuals and just make, the best of whatever we were doing.
My dad is really similar. Yeah, the only kind of relationship advice, but it's not really, I think, that he gave is if you go out with a guy, don't have the guy pay if it's not his money. Because that time when we were in college, to go out with, say, a friend or a guy friend or a girlfriend even, why should he pay for your meals, even if it's a date?
Yep.
Because it's not his money, it's his parents' money at that time. None of us were earning. Unless he make the money and if he wants to treat you, it's different. So that was something that I kind of remember. And the next thing I want to ask, and I hope it's a good transition, what's the best advice your dad gave you?
The best advice?
Yeah.
Ash, you look like you're about to burst. So I think Ash
I have a very funny one. So I think I was maybe about 16 or something. He just told me this: do not mix your alcohol. I think it's very good advice. But yeah, that was one of the funnier advices. My dad is very quiet, so a lot of the advice is a very nice, kind advice. Because I'm similar to him, so you need someone who's completely kind of opposite to push you and say, hey, that's not right.
What about you, Al? Can you remember any wonderful advice?
I don't know whether advice, a lot of scolding, like check your car for God's sake. I don't know whether that constitutes as advice.
Yeah, that's advice.
I'm so bad with my car. I think it's just thanks to my dad that, now I, actually send regular servicing and things like that. And so that was his, check your car for God's sake.
They always notice all these little things that you never think about. They have a different mindset, like things like cars.
Practical.
Very practical
They're very
things.
practical advice. They don't give you things like, those.
See, life advice and all that, I think, I don't know, maybe Tammy might disagree because you probably go to your dad
think
for it, right? But my mom would give me, solid
Those
life advice. Yeah,
life
don't do
advice,
this, But my dad would be like, when you
Follow
fry
your
fish,
dreams.
don't put your face near the oil.
I don't recall my dad ever giving me any hallmark advice except for check the bloody car.
It's not manly
And
enough
stop watching
to give.
TV.
My dad is the hallmark kind of guy. He quotes stuff. And because my dad, I think, is kind of spiritual also. He's very wise. So one of my favorite, and it helps me through a lot, it's this Chinese saying, but the translation very loosely is, as the ship docks, it will set itself straight. The way I see it is this: no matter how difficult life is, it will be okay. Everything will work out. At this stage of my life as an adult, with so many things going on, I always remember this advice. At every stage, you will come across a certain challenge, but then you just have to, overcome it, and then it will be okay. And everything works out at the end.
He's more Hallmark than your mother then.
Very. My mom is the one that don't put your face near the fish. kind.
Right, the practical advice, isn't
Yes.
it? Yeah.
My mom is quite cute. Sometimes, her advice is like quite funny and you don't really know how factual it is. Like eat your long beans, you'll grow taller. And look at me now. So long beans doesn't make you taller, guys. I've tested it. But what about you, Intan?
My dad. Okay. I would say one is the same as Elena. He goes on and on about making sure I have water in the car. And he'll say something like, I don't care if your car is new. You still need to put water in. And it's something he continues to say even to this day. Every time he comes back, every time he steps foot in my car, it'll be like, have you put water in? Again, Dad's not a Hallmark guy. What you get from him is you follow by his example. It's not so much verbally, but what he does.
Yeah.
And so that's how you sort of pick up on the silent advice, so to speak, right? The traits, like I said, of being fearless, of being very spirited, of motivated, very driven. All those are what you see of him. So you pick up and he doesn't need to say much.
Yeah, the thing is, my dad is also the kind of person who set examples by doing it.
Yes.
Like
They
Very
walk
much
the
so.
talk, right?
Yes.
they walk the talk, and I think one thing I learned from him is taking care of parents. I see how he took care of my grandparents last time. Man, and I'm prepared to do this for my parents because I've seen how he did it for my grandma and my grandfather. He just doesn't, dish out Hallmark codes,
Yeah.
but he really went through, and I think it's what he used in his life, what he experienced, and now he is really, telling me and helping me go through the same thing that he went
The
through.
issue with my dad is he cannot get away with dishing out so-called Hallmark advice simply because he's a storyteller. He loves to tell us about what he used to do when he was younger,
Right,
what he
yeah.
did, the mischief that he got up to and all that. So every time he tries to dish out something about thou shalt not do this, thou shalt not do that, then we'll be, but Dad, didn't you say that when you were at this age, you did something like this? And so don't mess with us because we remember everything. So yeah, he can't get away with it,
But I think it's more like do as I say, not do as I do.
Oh, yeah.
For
sure.
I think that's always like that. And like what Tammy said, we learn from them as they do things and how they approach life,
Yeah.
And I think what I learned, the biggest lesson I think I've learned from my dad is his courage. He has been so tenacious. So my dad had went through all those struggles, he lost his job and all, but we never felt it. As children, we never did. We never felt, there was never a day where we struggled. But they went through all those struggles and they didn't tell us. And he is so tenacious right to the point where he lost his second leg. And by that time, I think a lot of people would have given up. But when he had his second leg amputated a year before he passed away, the first thing he told us was, I want a prosthetic leg. He still wanted to live life to the fullest. And I think that's the biggest lesson. So even these days when I have a hard time and I think back, wow, he went through so much. He didn't complain, but he pursued life.
They're more action oriented, right?
Yeah.
Basically, they show
Absolutely.
you what you should be doing instead of telling you things.
Yes.
I see how my dad, he's very caring, very gentle. Honestly, you don't have to tell him I'm not well. He would basically he would do it out of his own actions. Like even on a lazy Sunday afternoon, right, while the rest of us are probably having a nap, he would quietly sneak out, go down to the kitchen and make chuchur. In that sense, you do things for the ones you love. Sometimes, yes, you do have to say it, but sometimes showing it is a lot more
Yeah.
meaningful because you remember so much more.
What's your favorite memories of your dad? Maybe just choose one. I know that's probably going to be
That's
quite a
really
lot.
hard. I'm sorry.
Something that stands out.
I have one because of this very intense relationship, putting it mildly, between my father and I. There was one time, and I will always appreciate him for that because I was working in Penang and I was having a hard time adjusting and it was so tough and, I was wishing I could come home, and I was depressed because, it's been my first time away from home. And when I came back for a break, my mom never noticed that I was upset or sad. She didn't, because I kept a front, but my dad did, surprisingly. So there was a time where he suddenly called me to the room and he just told me this, I know lah, I'm a lousy dad. Then after that he said, but then he stops, he goes to his table, he brings out his call card with his number. And he passes it to me and he says, but if you should ever need me, if you ever want to come back home, you can call me 24/7 and I'll be there and I'll bring you home. And I took the card at that time and I burst into tears. Yeah. I mean, that kind of healed our relationship because it felt that despite the, very tumultuous relationship that we had, he loved us. So I will always appreciate that moment when I like to think about my dad and know that, he really loved us. That is a memory I will draw on lah.
What about you, Ash?
There's a lot of memories. I spent a lot of time with my dad. I followed him to the office. I think kindy, he fetched and sent me to kindy. So, we would always have that traveling time together. Even in high school, because my mom worked nights. So my dad would be at home and we would make dinner together. That's how, I started being in the kitchen with him and he would talk. But I think one that I would look back very fondly is just that my dad used to use this men's perfume called Brut. I will always remember, to me, like now I'm thinking about it, I'm feeling like kind of emotional, but like that smell, just dad. That's it. I just think of him, right? And I used to, when I was really young, he would come home from work at about lunchtime to have lunch and a power nap, about 10 minutes before he goes back to work. And after he finishes lunch, he would, power nap. And you didn't have to call me. He didn't have to say anything. I would grab a pillow and I'd go right next to him and snuggle up because I just loved that smell. Like that was like, Dad. It's just, I don't know.
Comforting.
It's so comforting.
And you, Tammy, can you recall anything?
So many. But I think what came to my mind, one time when we were younger, it was McDonald's. So my dad is very particular about what we eat, obviously, when we were growing up. So McDonald's is kind of like a treat. So one time, he wanted us, because we were very shy, but he wants to train us. So it was the first time we were made to order stuff. And seriously, I hated it. But all right, I did it for the entire family. And obviously, I got one order wrong. So my mom was like, oh, you got this. So my dad was like, you see, in life, people will always focus on that one mistake. When you did 9 things right, but the entire world will focus on that one thing, you forget that you got the 9 things right.
Yeah.
So that was also one lesson that I remembered. In life, don't always focus on the bad or your mistakes, because you have done a lot of things right too. Another memorable thing was like recently, I think, he talked about how he went through one period of his life. Like Elena mentioned earlier, they never complained. And now as a grown-up, I realized how big that sacrifice is, not being with family. And he never gave up on family. When we were in Ipoh and he was just traveling, I really appreciate everything that he did for us last time, and it fuels me to not complain so much because I'm so privileged. I have everything. It really inspired me to push on.
One very fond memory that always makes me smile is that whenever he comes to visit me here in Malaysia, or whenever I speak to him, my dad loves to write. He's a storyteller. So he used to pen down his stories. So, nostalgic recollections of his childhood, schooling days, adventures, right? And he would pen them down. And then he graduated to actually typing it on his phone, and he would keep them on his phone. And I remember when I got the job with NST, he got really proud of it. Yeah. So one of the fondest memories, and that still continues to be so today, is that he would write something and he'd sort of sheepishly, edge over to me and say, any chance you can have a read, of my story? Maybe you might see something, right? And then he'd peer over my shoulder as I scrutinize his writing. And I'd be like, oh my God, the role reversal, because he used to be the one rapping my knuckle when my English was so bad when I was at school. And he used to be, for me, he was like the absolute teacher, you know. And now the role has reversed and he's like sitting there, just have a quick look. I know, you're so busy, but maybe, if there's any mistakes, perhaps. And I'll be there, like editing his piece, and then he'd go away and then he'd come back again the next day. Sometimes I pretend I'm not interested. I'll say, Dad, okay, I don't have time. But, it warms me inside.
Yeah.
It's like, it's priceless. That moment when you're sitting there with your dad, everything you say means so much to them, and it used to be different, right? It used to be the other way around.
Yes.
So, yes, for me, that's my
The
fond
teacher
memory.
becomes the student. you know?
Yeah, and it's nice. Suddenly you're enjoying a balanced and a mature relationship where there's mutual respect. I wouldn't have it any other way. And I don't care that I never had anything to sort of recall, growing up. But I will tell you, what we are enjoying now in our adulthood, now that we're more mature adults, is priceless.
Yeah.
Makes up for all the,
Yeah.
enemy number one.
When was the moment when you guys realized that your parents or your father had aged? Like, when had you come to that conclusion? Like,
You always see them as a superhero.
Yes.
Nothing can go wrong. They're always going to be there. And I don't know, it's just, they're just untouchable in that
They
sense,
make
right?
it look so seamless.
Right.
don't they?
Yeah.
So when I was about 10, my dad had a heart attack. So when my uncle came to fetch me, I was like, no. He's like, your dad had a heart attack. I was like, no. I was just, in the day, I was like, no, he's coming. He said, no. And my grandmother had to come. They took me to the hospital. It still didn't sink in. The moment when they opened the CCU, right, the cardiac care unit door, and I saw him straight at the window, I was like, oh my God. That was really hard to take because this is the guy this is my number one guy, and he's not well. And I don't know if he's okay and if he's going to be okay. And it was just...
Yeah, on the note of, our dads being our superhero, my dad has always been, the guy who gets everything right. He's Mr. Fix-It, he's always on the ball. And you never see anything that goes wrong because he would have, sorted it out. But recently he got sick. I suddenly realized, oh no, like you said, our superhero is sick. The role had to be reversed, whereby I had to be his superhero. I had to be the one to advise him, listen, you stay motivated. You can do this because I know you, Dad, because you're so strong and you've always been strong for us.
Yeah.
And now it's your turn.
Yeah.
It's my turn to support you, my turn to motivate you, my turn to inspire you. And it's your turn to help me on this, so that we can get through this together.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that was quite scary for me actually, because he's
It
our
is.
number one guy. He's our superhero. He's Dad.
Exactly.
And Dad
Nothing
is like,
can,
nothing can
nothing.
beat Dad.
No.
Right?
I think we
And-
like to think that he's invincible. Dads are invincible.
because they make it look so easy
make it-
because
yeah,
they never tell you the struggles they go through,
Yeah.
the challenges that they have to endure.
It's very easy to believe in them.
Because
They make it
needed
so
to
easy
believe.
to believe in them.
Yes.
It might not be as obvious, but in hindsight, when you look back, you're like,
Yeah. Well, it's Father's Day. Do we have any final words or message for our dear father this Father's Day?
I lost my dad in 2018, and they say time heals all wounds, but it has not. And I would say treasure your dads. Really, I can totally understand for those people who are celebrating Father's Day and who lost their parents and who lost their dads. It's like a part of your childhood goes. And I never realized the role or the importance or the influence that my dad had until he passed away. Then only it hit me like a ton of bricks. For those of you out there with dads and may not have the most perfect relationships with them, I mean, Asian parents, who does? But you just treasure them. And for those of you who have lost your parents or lost your dads, they're in a better place. But happy Father's Day to those of you who are out there, even those who are not biological fathers, but who have played a father role, and a lot of uncles who have been a father figure. So, happy Father's Day to all of you.
Yeah, so I'm very blessed and very grateful. I always say this, to have my dad in my life, because he really helped shape the me that I am. And a good father really shapes, I think, daughters and their children.
That's right.
Without him, I think, there are certain things that I wouldn't be able to do. My lighthouse, I always say, it's my dad. Growing up, I also know he sacrificed a lot for the family. So I'm very, very thankful. My dad has never forced anything on us. The one thing that me and my siblings, we really appreciate is that he will always give us advice, but as adults, we are always free to make our own decisions. He allowed us to spread our own wings, I always say. And I'm also very thankful for such a wise and open-minded father in certain ways. So to my dad, happy Father's Day. And, we really appreciate and love you so much. He is one of my greatest blessings in life.
I think all of us would agree, right, that we have, dads who are present and those who really took an interest in, shaping your character. And even if it wasn't verbally, it was through their actions. And I just got to say, I'm really thankful for everything that he's done. And living far away from him, it's harder to spend, especially the twilight years away, because you want to be of service to him, how he was of service to me. But to my dad, thank you so much for being who you are. He's not perfect for sure, but he's my dad, and I love him for it. And so Acha, thank you so much, and I love you.
And following on to that, I write for a living. I play with words every day. But when it comes to my dad, I'm actually out of words. I can only think of 3 words. Dad, or Abba, as I call him. I love you. And you know that. I don't need to explain myself. And, Dad, those stories that you're compiling and gathering in your phone. Well, my dream is to actually be able to put it together. I in my line of work, I interview people. I write their stories. But I think it's time for me to interview my dad and write his story, because it's something that
Oh, absolutely.
I aspire to do, and I hope I can do it, in time. And it's something that we, the children can hold on to as a precious thing, something to learn from, and for the future generation to learn from. And Dad, I promise, I'll never pretend that I don't have time to look at your work, and they're great work. I tell you, I have not seen fantastic writing. I don't say it simply because we don't say such things in our family, and it would be an honor, to put together your writing and put it out there for people to read. So for Father's Day, I just want to say, Dad, there's not much for me to say except I love you, and hope to see you again soon when this pandemic settles.
I want to add, I believe Intan's ability as a writer and editor probably is inherited from her father.
Yeah.
So,
And my grandfather.
And your
My
grandfather.
grandfather,
A
my
generation.
Interesting, isn't it?
Yeah.
And
So,
Dad's really proud of it.
the fact that he always asks you, it's a sign of pride.
Yeah.
And I feel so humbled, that when he asked me, even though I pretend no.
Don't you think the moment that they show you that they're proud of you, that's the best?
It's the best feeling.
But ladies, let me just say, I think all of us are very blessed and lucky to have really good dads. In their own way. Honestly, we're super, super lucky. I think we have amazing
They were
dads.
present.
Very amazing dads. Yeah. We're very
They
lucky.
kept the family together. They
did.
Super.
And on that note, so we're going to have to say
Goodbye.
Goodbye.
and Happy Father's Day.
Happy Father's Day, guys.
Yeah.